This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Today, our guests are Tom Preston and Luciana Nuñez. Tom Preston is co-author of Coaching Power. He is the founder of the Preston Associates, one of the world's premier executive coaching firms. With decades of experience coaching leaders across industries and geographies, he has helped organizations achieve extraordinary outcomes. A former private equity executive and best-selling author of Coach Yourself to Success, he brings deep insights and practical wisdom to his work. And Luciana is a co-author of Coaching Power, is an accomplished executive coach and former CEO with more than 20 years of leadership experience at Fortune 500 companies, including Bayer, Danone. Did I say that right, Luciana?
You did.
Danone, okay, and Roche. She blends her strategic expertise with a passion for mentoring, serving as a board member, investor, and advisor to entrepreneurs and executives worldwide. So I welcome you both to the program today. It is really great to have you on.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us, Steve.
So let's give us a little bit of context. Luciana, why don't we go with you first? Just kind of tell us where you grew up, a little bit about your experience and where you are now, and then we'll follow with Tom.
Happy to share. So I was born in Argentina in the 70s, a child of that troubled time down there. And I started my career in the corporate world, first at Roche in marketing roles. And then I was very lucky to be in a program that allowed me to go internationally to other geographies. So then I moved to Switzerland, then back to Argentina on regional roles. And then I did the usual corporate ladder, moving from Roche then to Bayer, to bigger roles, and then moving on to Danone in a different industry in food, first in a global marketing role, and then as a GM of a series of businesses. And the funny path of how that led me into what I'm doing today, which is executive coaching, is that at some point in that corporate career, I had 3,000 people in my scope, and someone told me, my boss at the time said, your brief is to upgrade the leaders in your function. And I thought, oh, how do I upgrade 3,000 leaders? So then I decided it'd be through the power of coaching, and I became a coach, never thinking that I would do that for a living. And here I am. So fast forward to 2019, when I joined the Preston Associates, I chose to leave the corporate world to do what I really like to do now, which is maximize the power of coaching by, instead of having a team of 3,000 people, we get to coach tens of thousands of leaders across the world. And I do have to say there's no better work than doing that when you see the impact that it can have on people. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And where are you based now?
I'm based in New York.
New York. Okay, great. Okay, and Tom, how about you?
So I come from a peripatetic background in the sense that I was born in the UK, but then brought up in Malta and then Hong Kong. So a bit of a kind of international mutt, really. And then I studied, obviously, and joined a commodity trading firm post-university, which took me to Africa for 10 years and the Middle East. And once I'd finished with that baptism of fire commercially, the company that I was working for was owned by a family who asked me to move back to Hong Kong and set up a private equity firm for them, which was quite brave given the fact that I didn't have an MBA, hadn't been to Harvard, all of those good things. But that's what I did and had an extraordinary time. And that's what led me into coaching, because at any given time I would sit on, 10, 12 boards or whatever. And I very quickly realized that internal rates of return and discounted cash flows were not what got me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
What got me out of bed in the morning was the idea of aligning teams behind a definition of collective success, being a thinking partner to the CEO of the firms in which we invested in, particularly because in Asia, family businesses are almost like people's children, right?
Hmm.
They absolutely nurture these things, and they are deeply attached to their businesses. And you get a private equity firm come in with rapacious demands about, we want 3x of our money in
Hmm.
4 years or 4 months or 4 weeks or whatever the unrealistic ask might be.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly you can fall apart in terms of aligning to a place that is successful for both. So that's what I really, really enjoyed. And then this was in the 1990s, early 2000s. It was a time when a lot of private equity firms were losing their shirts in China and Indonesia. You had a lot of the Asian currency crisis, all of that stuff. So, but we did pretty well, and I put it all down to coaching. So once I was aware of what this was, I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. So I sold out of the firm, and after a brief stint doing something else, and then came back to Europe and did the first postgraduate program in executive coaching, and the Preston Associates was born.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're based in London now, is that correct?
I am,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Okay. So how did you two meet then? We've got you're from different walks of the world, so to speak, and so how did you come together?
I'll let you answer that, Lou, and then I'll give my voice. No,
That's going to be a nice experiment to see where they intersect. So Tom at the time was coaching the CEO of the company that I was a GM at. So I knew of Tom, and I was lucky enough to experience a couple of group coaching sessions that he led with the CEO and a bunch of other general managers that were there. We were a very, very unruly bunch, as you would expect GMs and CEOs to be. And Tom managed it with such strength and grace at the same time that I was very impressed with him. And I think from what I know, but you tell that side of the story, Tom, because I was already a coach in those days at that company for this process of upgrading the leaders internally. I think that Tom heard that I was a coach, and when I left the company, it created quite a bit of noise because I quit. I did what most people don't do when they are at a point in their career in their 40s being a CEO. Very few people quit, and I quit because I knew that I wanted to do something else with my life. So it created enough noise so that Tom heard that I was leaving, and I let him pick it up from there, I guess.
Well, I mean, of course, Luciana's reputation came before her. I mean, she was such a highly respected leader in that particular business. I'm sure in every business she's worked in. But she was also known as a people person and as somebody who could optimize the potential of the people that worked with and for her. So I sort of knew that she had coaching skills, if you like, but I didn't know that she was actually a coach. And I remember the first time that we met one on one. So we'd come across each other a lot. And she came to see me in my office, and within 5 minutes, I was, if we can have this extraordinary person in our team, not only will we benefit, but our clients will just be so happy with what they get.
Yeah.
And after quite a lot of persuasion and a lot of you know, just trying to help her understand really that this is something that she would just be a complete natural at. She finally agreed to join, and within a very short period of time, became the head of our Americas operation. And the rest is history. I mean, we were
Yeah.
so lucky to have her, to find her, and to benefit from all of her skills.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and then you both came together. I'm holding this up for the people that are looking on the video here, of a book called Coaching Power, and leading with coaching to create individual, team, and organizational outperformance. So, great book, by the way. I really enjoyed reading it, and got some great information out of there. But let's just jump right into it. Why do you feel that coaching is the key to unlocking potential and supporting long-term organizational culture?
Lou.
I think, for us, it was an interesting journey to write the book. And it really started first with just the work that we do day by day with our clients, where when we take them through a coaching process, they want to bottle that magic and bring it to their teams. And the simple reason is that they know and they've experienced firsthand that coaching moves the needle of performance, and that there's a real art and science to how you do that. So the first genesis of the book were those leaders that wanted to have something in their hands that they could scale to be able to coach their teams. And the reason why we think that coaching is the key leadership skill for the future is that the world is changing super fast. And all of the key skills that we know we need as coaches are the skills that we think are going to be the difference between the best and the rest in the future. To give you an example, in this world where anybody can Google or chat GPT anything, a good leader is no longer the leader that has all the answers, is the leader that can ask the powerful questions. That's job
Yeah.
number one of a good coach. Job number two of a good coach is to really do active listening, to go deep into understanding what's going on. What are you hearing? What are you not hearing? What are the challenges and the emotions behind it? And the leaders that do active listening really are foundationally much more effective than the leaders that are just worried about their own view of the world. So we truly believe that in that old school model of command and control, there's no longer any power. The power is in the model where the leader can show up as a coach and get the best performance out of their team, a little bit like sports coaches do.
It's interesting when I read in the book, as you mentioned in the book, 20 years ago, people didn't really know what business coaches were. Now we hear about it all the time. It's commonplace, and there's a million coaches out there. But I think the line that you take is building a coaching culture. So not necessarily coaching one-on-one to just the top person at the firm, but how do you create a culture, and how do organizations get this coaching culture into their everyday language and practices? Tom, go ahead.
Um, I think I think it always starts with a leader buying into the power of coaching. And just to build on what Lou was just saying, one of the things that we've always done at TPA is we've never coached in a black box. So we've always explained to leaders what we are doing so that they can replicate it in their organization or with their own people and see the results that they get, right? So when we coach executives, we do two things at the same time. We coach them on all of their issues and what they want to achieve from coaching, and we help them to be a better coach. So that's point one. Point two is team coaching is super, super powerful. So when you coach a leader, as you build the trust and as they build the understanding of how much coaching can unlock potential, very often they charge us with then coaching their team.
Yeah.
Once their team gets it, you then can move into the senior leadership team with more group coaching type things. And really, I would say enlightened organizations increasingly start to think about, okay, if this is working on that level of cascade, how do I create a culture in which coaching is really part of our DNA and drives our solutioning, the way we think through problems? And at that point, there are so many different things that you can do. So, for example, at the Preston Associates, we have something called the ACE program, which is Advanced Coaching Expertise. And yes, we do train people in organizations to be great coaches, but that's not the key thing. The key thing is that we then help them create a matrix of coaching within the organization that builds trust. So you might have, for example, finance coaching marketing. There's always a tension between, the first thing that you cut in difficult times is marketing, right? According to finance.
Right.
The last thing you cut in difficult times, according to marketing, is marketing spend, right? So it's a kind of so once they get to know each other because they're coaching each other, you start to build into functional understanding, relationships, trust that help address these knotty issues that people get into because they're entrenched in their view. So actually building a coaching culture is a hugely powerful organizational development tool, not just connected to coaching. And you can make that bespoke. If you say we want to build trust across an organization, or we want to build speed across an organization, or we want to build innovation across an organization, a coaching culture can address so many different demands from a business, and can be tweaked according to what is most important. So I think more and more it's kind of enlightening. And I think the other thing that is important to say on coaching cultures is that in 10 years ago, a lot of firms thought, oh, well, I'm not going to pay an external executive coach. I'm just going to create a bunch of internal coaches and we'll do it that way. And it doesn't work at the top of the house. At the top 10%, you still need external people because there are politics, there are competing agendas, people are competing for the same jobs. There's lots of stuff that makes internal coaching, frankly, unsafe. But in the middle of the organization, it's awesome. It totally works, right? If they are well trained, well supervised, good coaches. So we could spend the whole hour talking about that, Steve,
Right.
which we won't.
Well, and you bring up the example. I think it made me think of when people are super busy or there's chaos or maybe there's cost cutting that needs to happen. What I see a lot is people say, "Oh, well, we can cut that leadership development program or we can cut the coaching because that's kind of just you know." I don't want to say the word fluff, but something that we don't have to run the business. Yet I think you're making the point, and I would agree with you that that's the last thing you should cut because that's what's going to take you out of this chaos and struggling that the company has.
Yeah, it was interesting because post the global financial crisis, so 2008, people were like deer in the headlights. They couldn't move, right? They couldn't make any decisions. But from 2009 to 2011, we grew at an exponential rate we had never, ever seen before because people realized that to get out of this mess, frankly, and to figure out the way forward, you had to develop the very best people. You had to over invest in the great people. And I think today, when we started 23 years ago, it was fluff. It was like, if you can't do it, teach it, whatever. But I think people now understand that coaching is probably the single most effective leadership development tool and talent development tool available.
Yeah. And in the book, you also state, Luciana, maybe you can address this, is, that thinking partnerships have real transformational impact. So tell us what you think a thinking partnership is and how does that affect the inner workings of a company?
The first thing that is helpful to remember when it comes to thinking partnerships is that as humans, we have to get past a very basic barrier that we have, which is the need to ask for help. right? When we think of how we ask for help, we often shy away from it. But when you start to unpack, first of all, what are the barriers? Why don't we ask for help? And it's typically because you think, oh, I'm gonna come across as unprepared or stupid or incapable. But then when you flip it and when you ask someone, how did you feel the last time someone came to you asking for help? They go, oh, well, trusted, recognized, important. So the first thing that we do to create thinking partnerships is to coach people out of that barrier and to help them realize that there's a lot of power when you invite someone to think something through together with you. Because you say, I don't have all the answers, but I really trust your knowledge and your judgment. And all of a sudden, the level of connection and trust in that relationship is 10x. So it's a great influential tool actually to create thinking partnerships. And it also creates, to Tom's point, a level of connectivity within a business that allows everyone to take a look under the hood and realize that, yeah, every leader has challenges, and every leader needs a thinking partner that can help you think through together. So that's a little bit the secret sauce of what we coach our leaders to do. And then we coach them on a very simple structure for how you can make the most out of a thinking partnership. And it's a very simple framework that we truly unpack in the book that we call trilogy questions. We call them trilogy because it has 3 steps. The first step is to really get clear on, what do I want, right? A lot of people go straight into the, how do I fix this problem, without having spent time deciding and defining, what do I want? Because when you know what you want, the how and the who does what by when becomes very, very easy. So we help clients understand what are some good power questions that you can ask as a coach to stay in that place of defining the what first. Because, for example, in teams, we see teams start to spin when they go straight into how do we solve for this, but they haven't created alignment on the what. What is going on in a nutshell? What does success look like? What have we tried so far? What has worked? What hasn't worked? What do we know? What don't we know? What data do we have? What data do we need? What level of risk are we willing to take? This is still staying in the what do I want stage, but if you get the alignment behind those questions first, again, the how and the who does what by when becomes very fluid. So we help people first break the barrier of asking for help, create a thinking partnership where you really are at eye level with the person in front of you, and they help you think through something in ways typically that, by the way, are going to be different to your natural way of thinking it. So it enriches your thinking, it uncovers your blind spots, and it shows you around corners in ways that when you're stuck in the problem on your own, you're not going to be able to do that. So when we, to your point, change the culture of an organization by creating these thinking partnerships at scale, the business gets off to a level of performance that, honestly, when this is used at scale, it's just amazing to see the power that it has.
You make a really good point. I've been asked, like you probably have too, when you were the CEO of the company, what was your biggest mistake early on? And I always go to, I was 41 years old. I was way over my head as far as what I thought my business acumen needed to be. And I didn't ask my predecessor, who was very willing to answer all my questions. I didn't call him and ask him enough because of that same reason, as you said. I was afraid he was going to discover how unprepared I was, or what I didn't know, or how stupid I'd look, or whatever. And so I look back on that, and what a missed opportunity to, really pick the brain of my predecessor as opposed to being worried what he would think about it.
Spot on.
Yeah, yeah. So let's look now for, I think it's really fascinating, in today's times, and you say in the book as well, that now we have to lead our companies through 5 different generations of workers. And, they all, not all, but often have different wants and different needs and different ways of looking at things. So as a leader, you're going to have to appreciate that and learn how to go through those different generational ideals. Tom,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, what do you see in that? Do you see that that leaders make mistakes by not appreciating that complex piece of it?
Well, completely, because if you think about, think about how kids went to school fairly recently, right? Let's say they just came out of university. Their experience of education is entirely different to somebody who's 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, or 60 years old, right? Because they're used to coaching, they're used to finding their own answers, they're used to being supported to be themselves, right? So, whereas a different generation has a different experience. So it's really, if you don't appreciate that one size doesn't fit all generationally, it's really complex. I mean, Luciana does a lot of work in this stuff, so I'm going to hand over to her because she's much more articulate about it than I am.
Okay, go ahead, jump in.
Well, I can only build on what Tom is saying because I think in that work that we've done throughout the last few years, in terms of really researching the different generations and understanding, them and what moves them and what gets them going, we've realized that yes, there's a lot of basic commonalities across generations in terms of what they want from work, right? They all want work that, first of all, allows them to make a living, basic, but they also want meaning and purpose and a culture where they feel they can be, to your point, themselves and thrive. But the expression of those desires is a little bit different generation by generation because to Tom's point, they grew up in a different context. So you're going to have the range from baby boomers that grew up in a much more hierarchical type of place where you were expected to do what you were told without a peep, and you respect authority and you respect rules and regulations is how you grew up, and that's going to be your view of the world. And then you put on the other extreme the Gen Zers today, which, by the way, are already 20% of the workforce in the US, and they've grown up to expect a lot of autonomy and a lot of freedom and a lot of sense of purpose and work-life balance. And I think generations are talking past each other, and they don't realize that they all bring a wealth of superpowers. That if you get to play each of those superpowers to their strength, and you get to create that magic of baking a cake with multiple ingredients, is going to be so much more flavorful. And again, every generation brings their own little tweak to the party. For example, I'm a Gen Xer, and we are the generation that is the ultimate, self-driven, independent generation. We raised ourselves. Our parents were working. We came back from school alone. We cooked our own meals in the microwave. We sat in front of the TV. So we are independent, and we get to navigate pretty much any environment because that's how we grew up to be. So we understand a little bit that world of the baby boomer and the world of the Gen Z, that we also can be the bridges between generations. So what we are doing in the space of leadership is help people build those bridges so that everyone sees working across generations as an untapped superpower versus a source of friction or misalignment or lack of understanding. That honestly is such a shame that they are not, for example, using the case that you shared before, the people that survived the financial crisis in 2008, they are battle tested. So for the younger generations that are going through this for the first time, they have so much wisdom that they can share, but they are not talking to each other. So we are trying to create and curate some of those bridges so that everyone gets to play to those strengths. I hope that gives you a flavor
Yeah,
for how we
yeah,
think it makes the workplace a much
Yeah,
richer place.
and I think that we need to understand that this 5 generations will very soon turn into 6 and 7 because we will all work longer,
yeah,
right? A new generation will come in, and suddenly, we move from 5 to 6. It's so this idea that we need to understand each other, we need to appreciate each other, only comes from awareness. It only comes from dialogue. It only comes from analysis. We need the data on, what kind of generations are we leading in our own organization now? And it's not fluff because it has
Mhm.
data driven. And
Yeah.
yeah,
because each group need some things that are unique to them, not everything, but
yeah,
some.
yeah,
And we have to bring, the whole use of AI and technology and all of that stuff also to be not something that a generation is totally pro and another generation is completely afraid of and won't use, but to something that, you know, is something cool and shiny that we're going to play with together.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me when I was a young parent, my wife and I took some parenting classes, and I remember what the person said leading the class. He said, if you think that you're going to raise your kids from the authority, command, and control environment that you were brought up in today's world, you're going to make your life miserable. And again, it's just, it's what you said. It's just, you know, you have to be aware of the different generations and how people grew up and their different perspectives. And now as a very proud grandparent, you know, I see my daughter negotiating with her 3-year-old all the time. And I'm kind of like, you know, back when in my day, there was no negotiation going on. It was you did what we were told. And as you said, Luciana, it's, you know, without question. And so it is a different world. I think the same thing happens in leadership. We just have to appreciate the differences. And Luciana, I want to ask you too, because in the book you actually mentioned that, you know, again, your experience is also different in the sense that you're used to being the only diversity in the room sometimes. And
Mhm.
so that brings a different world too. If we look at, you know, uh, you know, the diversity pieces of our teams today look differently than they did 20 years ago.
Totally, and I'll speak to that with the caveat of, you know, diversity these days is a four-letter word in the world of business, and I think that's a shame more than anything because it's pretty clear that it moves the needle of business. When you have a diverse team, and when we mean diversity well before the obvious patterns, right? It's well before beyond race and gender and age. Is the way you think, is your style, is how you solve problems, is how you are able to see past barriers. That cognitive diversity as well is a real source of strength for a business. And when businesses curate a team that brings that diversity of background and expertise and thinking styles and lived experiences, the results that they produce are better. The data shows
Yeah.
this. So, as good business leaders, of course, from a social, ethical perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. But let's also remember it makes all the business sense in the world. So, if nothing
Yeah.
else, for me, the case for diversity is that because it makes the thinking deeper and the ability to deal with frictions much richer, the results are much better. I'm not saying diversity is easy, quite the opposite. What I'm saying is because it's a source of that richer source of debate and thinking, it moves the needle so much better. So for
Yeah.
me, the case should be now stronger than ever, if anything.
Yeah, and you state in the book that again, research shows, as you mentioned, that diverse teams do better, and to be able to have diverse teams, as you stated, you use the term in the book, cultural competence,
Mhm.
which I thought was a good term because that kind of brings it down. You have to be willing to look at the different cultural perspectives. And felt like we kind of made some great progress in that way, at least felt like it. And now we're seeing pushback.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but I also go ahead, Tom.
I think what Luciana was saying is really an important differentiator. Um, the definition of diversity was sometimes tricky.
Yeah.
I think if we and divisive in and of itself in its labels. Where we think of it, as Luciana described, as cognitive diversity,
Yeah.
it has nothing but good connotation because we know that collective intelligence is better than individual
Yeah.
intelligence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's simply a way of creating and accepting cognitive diversity and using it again as a superpower. So I'm not surprised that we have this backlash at the moment. I think all good things, if they go too far, can be tricky for people and they
Yeah.
cause the pendulum to go back to the middle, right? I'm not saying it's a good thing to go all the way left, but all the way right isn't good either, right? So,
Right.
so I think if we think of it as cognitive diversity, we get over some of those not divisive labels and all of that. It's simply making sure that people who think differently for various reasons have a lot to contribute to a collective solution to a problem or to collective success.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
if I can build on that,
Sure.
I'll give you even a personal example of what I call the so what of diversity, right? Because I know myself, I know how my cultural upbringing translates into the so what of how I show up as a leader. And then I've done the work to explain how what I bring moves the needle of the business. For example, I grew up in Latin America, in Argentina, raised by a single mom. And I was an immigrant in the US. That really meant that, number one, if you're raised by a single mom, you know better than to be picky. So you can put me in any situation and I'm going to navigate my way around it. Number two, you grew up in Argentina where inflation is triple digits every year. So guess what? We can turn on a dime in terms of innovation and resilience and adaptability to change. And that's an asset to a business. Because I am an immigrant, I would be in a big meeting room where I wouldn't fully speak the language, but I learned to read that room for the things that were said and not said. And that's one of my superpowers because I had to learn the codes much faster. And that is a real superpower of in 1 minute being able to read the room. And it's a power that you can coach your people on and transmit. So part of what I think, to Tom's point, makes cognitive diversity rich is that people need to start owning the so what of how does that diversity add value to the team and to the business. And that I think is missing because of the fear of the labels being loaded today. So I hope
Yeah.
then we'll get to that in-between place where we get to unpack the beauty of what it can bring.
Yeah, and I think that I am, for example, deeply dyslexic, right? So that's not a label necessarily, but it means that I think differently. And that can be super powerful with a bunch of people who are kind of more like the accountant types, because I see the world as a completely different place. So they help me, I help them, right? So it's a practical thing. I think sometimes diversity got lost in its purpose in terms of driving business performance. And that's what Luciana and I and our organization are interested in. It's really, how does this drive the performance of a business? How does it engage people to collective success and help them behave in a way that makes it easier to perform?
Yeah, and I think you two are perfect examples of just different life experiences. I mean, you come from different places. You talked about your dyslexia. You talk about being raised. Luciana, in the book, you talk about your mom being a lawyer and a single mom, but your father was a guerrilla rebel fighter. So I mean, these are experiences that you learn and shape who we are. And when we bring all those together, it just makes sense that collaboratively or collectively we can come up with something better than any one person can do on their own. Switching gears here a little bit, let's talk about leading teams. And again, you say in the book I think, Tom, you might have said this, interesting, that some leaders make a mistake of praising the outcome of the activity rather than the how the outcome was achieved. And again, we kind of go back to parenting, and that's something too that we try and focus on. So tell us why that's important in teams to make sure people understand the process.
Well, I think the first thing to say on this is that we're kind of brought up, if we're of a certain generation, by the way, but we're sort of brought up to think that constructive feedback is, the best way to learn, right? And I would fundamentally disagree with that, right? Because what the soul seeks is approbation and praise. So if you want somebody to do something more, well, loudly, amplify it, accelerate it, tell them that what they've done is good, right? Praise is the fuel of the human soul. It doesn't mean to say that you can't give people feedback on things that are not so good. But it generally means that, you don't train a Labrador by hitting it. You train a Labrador by giving it chicken, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that we're all dogs or anything, but I am trying to say that we're not that different, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's a really fundamental point to praise and the outcome. So here's the issue with the outcome, Steve. So if I say to you, Steve, you made an extra $1 million above your budget this month, well done. So I'm on an all hands call, whole company's watching, and all they've heard is that Steve's made $1 million, more than was in his budget. The audience have learned nothing. I've probably accelerated a little bit of jealousy around, oh, it's all about Steve again,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if I say on an all hands call, I'd like to say a big thank you to Steve because he's been collaborating across sales and marketing, because he's really taken seriously our drive to increase gross margin. He was able to do a project cross-functionally with a great team. And as a consequence, he has made $1 million more than his budget. So now the audience has learned how Steve made $1 million more than his budget, right? So it's not the what he did that matters. It's the how did he get the result? Because not only is then Steve thinking, oh, okay, so I've now had some praise for being collaborative, innovative, working in a team, being cross-functional, destroying silos, whatever it might be. But the whole organization has also heard, aha, that might be a route for me to increase my performance against budget.
Yeah.
So everybody has learned. If I just go, like I said, oh, Steve, $1 million, thanks. So
Yeah. 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 You also talk in the book, which is right up my alley too, in the sense that I identify as a storyteller, and you talk about the magic of storytelling. So in leading companies and leading your teams, you got to tell a good story, and even in the book, you give a lot of case studies and tell stories about actual things that really happened. So. Um, it's a leadership skill that sometimes people poo-poo because it sounds like too much kumbaya or something. But the reality is that storytelling is a very powerful way to lead people.
it always amazes me that people would poo-poo storytelling because the entire movie industry, the entire entertainment industry is based on storytelling and
Yeah.
that need for human beings to understand the story and be engaged with the story. And an organization is no different, right? If you want to engage people in discretionary effort, which is super important, you need to engage their sense of purpose and you need to engage their sense of contribution.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can engage their sense of purpose and their imagination as to how they can contribute
Hmm.
is through telling the story, painting the picture, showing them the movie, right? And to me, it
Yeah.
just is so obvious.
And I think another word that goes along with what you just said, and you say it in the book as well, is belonging. It's for me to find how do I belong in this group or how am I part of this group? And if I hear a good story and I can relate to the story, then I can say, yeah, that's me. That I can do that.
Yeah. And you know what? A good example of that is lawyers, where when a lawyer gets a matter, so a client gives them something to work on, and they've got maybe 10 associates. So, let's say it's an IPO or something like that, right? If those associates are operating blind, they're simply asked to do segments of work, and they don't know how they fit into the story, they're
Mhm.
going to be much less efficient than if they have understood what the client wants, what success looks like for the client, how the client wants to be interacted with, what they super care about in terms of what their IPO and how it works and the behaviors needed to get there, the context, what's important about this IPO in terms of what it will do for the organization, what it will do for the people, what it will do for the shareholders, what it will do for society when this company is bigger and has more cash and all of those things. And what is the benefit to the lawyers working on this project from doing it well, right? Their personal benefit. And then what is the benefit that they're creating for a great number of people, both within their law firm reputationally and all of that stuff, and for the company doing the IPO? And finally, how do we measure all of that? So once you go through that story with a team, even if you're asking an associate to do a single slice of business for you, a single slice of drafting or whatever it might be, they understand the whole. They do it so much better. But lawyers are not trained in general to do that. So there are so many examples of helping people to be able to tell the story, to help them perform better, and to help the people around them perform better.
Yeah, well said. Luciana, maybe you can tackle this one. I'm interested if you can tell us this without going into too much detail, but kind of in a nutshell, the differences between coaching, consulting, mentoring, and advice. So
Yeah.
just kind of describe that and the point you make in the book about it.
Yeah. I'll start with the easiest one, which is consulting, right? That's a relationship in which I'm paying someone to either give me the answers or build a process or do it for me, right? So there's an inherent, delegation of the task type of transaction in it. The other one is mentoring, where typically it's also a relationship between two parts, usually two individuals, one more senior than the other. And the mentor is there to show the path, to give people perspective and wisdom. So there's always this deference to authority a little bit. There's a sense of helping you navigate a certain environment, but the person seeking the wisdom from the mentor is going to seek it through the lens of a little bit, like we said before, storytelling and narrative and advice and perspective. Advising is a little bit more one-off transaction, right? Like I'm stuck in this bind. I don't know what to do. What would you advise me? So it's a kind of one-off, in and out type of relationship. Coaching is very different to all of them in the sense of it's also a very deep relationship between two people or a coach and the team. But the key difference in the dynamic is that the coach is there to guide the process and to ask the right questions. And the person is there to find their own answers, to get to their own solutions, not through the shortcut of giving them the answers, but actually by asking them the right questions and letting them get to the answers themselves. Because that's where the true power of coaching really comes, which is when you feel that the answer came from within, you're going to be fully committed to the execution of whatever action comes out as a result of the answers that you found. And that's the fundamental nature of a coaching relationship that is very different from the other ones, because in the other ones, typically the relationship is about someone giving you the answer. In this case, again, the whole power is in you finding the answer for yourself with the expertise and the wisdom and the guidance of a coach, which, as we say in the book, is one of the key superpowers of a coach, is to ask the right question in the right way at the right time. And when that unleashes that cascade of thinking in a client, what they come out with is pure gold. And then their level of accountability and ownership to that answer is going to be 10x than if they were to get that answer from a consultant, from a mentor, or from an advisor.
So I'm running a company and I like this coaching culture idea. I like the way it sounds. So I'm trying to implement it. When is it appropriate to hire an external coach? And is it different if you're looking just as an individual to get an external coach or team coaching, so to speak, from an external source?
So I think that the first thing that you have to think about is how senior are you in an organization? Executive coaching is not a cheap process, right? So you have to have an ability to add a considerable amount of value through the coaching process above and beyond the value that you would add without it, right? So you're kind of really looking at the top 10% of the house, I would say. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is I think that organizations should support their executives. So any coaching is better than no coaching, right?
Mhm.
But ask your organization before you pay for it yourself. Ask your organization, right? Because
Yeah.
it is a big investment. The other thing that's factual is that people don't appreciate what they don't pay for, right? So if you get something for free, it doesn't have the same value as if it's something you pay for. And when you get an external coach, the company pays the money, but you, the coachee, pay with something far more valuable, which is your time.
Yeah.
Because the thing that you're most time poor is that's the issue, right? So if you're going to show up for 2 or 3 hours, every so often with your coach, or 1 hour stints or whatever it might be, that is time that needs to create huge amounts of value for you and for your organization, because that's time that you can ill afford, right? So thinking through, how am I going to use coaching? What do I want to get out of it? What am I really going to work on? And am I prepared to commit both the time to actually do the coaching and then the time to implement the plans that come out of the coaching? If you're not prepared to do those two things, save your money and
Yeah.
save your time and the coach's time, right? But if you
Yeah.
are prepared to do it, honestly, I know this is true for Luciana. I know it's true from our worldwide team. There is something extraordinary where a client leaves the room or leaves the Zoom and says, "This is the most powerful conversation I've ever had in my entire life."
Yeah.
That's when you know it's working. And it's normally working because the coachee is dedicated and committed to it. So don't think a coach is just going to fix it all with some little magic wand for you. No, but they will support and challenge you to fix it for yourself.
Yeah, and I think a couple points that go along with that is a lot of times people will say, "Well, I just don't have time. I'm too busy. I've got too much going on." And again, if you hire a good coach and they help you, they're going to help you become more efficient with your time, right? And then the other one, of course, is the cost. Oh gosh, I just can't afford to pay for this right now. But again, a good coach is I would think, and I'm biased here, obviously, but is going to pay for themselves tenfold pretty quickly. So, yeah. I know we're running out of time. We've got so many things to answer. So I just want to touch on this one other thing here because it just caught my attention. And we could all agree that trust is so important to relationships and teams and whatever. Yet in the book, you say that trust is declining across the world. So if that's true, which I'm not debating it isn't, but how do you build that trust when people are not trusting as much?
Yeah. Well, it's, to be honest with you, Steve, is one of the reasons why we think coaching can be that secret sauce. Because when you engage in that process where there is no hierarchy, where there is real eye to eye level communication, when you know that someone is there in your corner to help you fight your battles because they have your best interest at heart, that is truly a relationship built on trust. And if you learn to build that muscle as a leader with a coach, and then you learn to coach your teams, the level of trust across the board that you're going to naturally create effortlessly in your team, with your stakeholders, with your counterparts, with your peers, is going to be the DNA of how you operate. So when you learn to act and lead as a coach because you've learned to build that trust, that's going to travel without you even having to think about it. we as coaches, we couldn't do the work that we do if we don't know how to earn the trust of our clients. We have a coaching expression that is called earn the right to advance. And as a coach, yes, we are there to support our clients, but we're also there to challenge our clients. And we can only do that when we've earned their trust. So if you learn to coach, you learn naturally to earn the trust, and that's going to make all the difference.
Yeah.
And I would say that if anybody listening to this is probably like, well, okay, that's all well and good, but how do I do that? And the answer is in the book, so buy it.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I should say that the book is very has pieces in it that are very instructional. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that, which I think is great. And as I said, the case studies are wonderful too. So as we're winding down for time here, I always ask my guests at this point in the interview the same common question. So I'm going to ask you first, Luciana, in case you have to jump off a little early here, but in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
I was told this once, and I really use it with my clients, which is know what you want and say it. First, knowing what you want is easier said than done. And then it's on you to be able to put it out to the world for people to know what you stand for and what you want and what you bring to the party. So know what you want and say it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Tom, how about you?
If you're wondering what your role is as a leader, here's the definition of the perfect leader. The perfect leader absorbs pressure, transmits clarity, and builds the confidence in others that they need to succeed.
Well said. Well said. Well, this has been a real pleasure talking to you two. Again, you didn't pay me to promote the book, but I am because it is a very good book and it really resonated with me. So, job well done, and it's very well presented as well. So, congratulations on that. I've learned a lot. It's been a pleasure talking with you today, and I wish you the best of luck with the book and your company going forward. And it's great that we can learn from people with vast international and diverse experiences that you both have. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Okay,
Thanks for doing it, Steve.
okay, take care, and maybe we'll run into each other down the road one of these days.
That'd be lovely.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.
You too. Bye, Steve.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.